Shalom, this is Reverend John Ferret, and welcome again to Lesson 47 of the podcast series, Bible podcast series, that I've entitled The Gospel According to Moses in the book of Exodus. And again, we've come to Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17, and we are stopping here because we are at a significant, major event in the history of mankind, where God enters a covenant with a particular people that affects world history forever. We're in lesson 3, and this will be in 2 parts as well as lesson 2 and lesson 1. We're on the introduction, and what we're doing is we're studying the 10 Commandments, but we're taking the 10 Commandments and we're putting them into their historical context. We're putting them into their textual context. We're actually returning to the Hebrew. We're actually returning to the Greek, as especially when we get into the New Testament, because we see that the 10 Commandments are in the New Testament. We'll see that again in this lesson. But when we do that, and when we begin to try to recapture the conceptual meaning in Hebrew of what we're dealing with in here, oh man, the 10 Commandments just explode with meaning. Our understanding becomes enhanced again, becomes enriched. Certain aspects even of the 10 Commandments and our understanding may even change. Now, the thing to remember, if you have listened to video 1, parts 1 and 2, and video 2, parts 1 and 2, that we find that there are no such thing as 10 commandments. When we take a look at the 3 verses in the Bible, Exodus 34, verse 28, Deuteronomy 4, verse 13, and Deuteronomy 10, verse 4, these are the only 3 places in our Bibles where you will see the words 10 commandments used. But it's really fascinating because it's a major translation error. When we get to the original Hebrew, it doesn't say 10 commandments. It says Aseret HaDevareem, the 10 statements or the 10 words. Matter of fact, even when the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew scriptures were translated into the Greek, and we got the Septuagint back in about 200 BC, the phrasing in those 3 verses, in Exodus 34 and in Deuteronomy, Aseret HaDevareem, was translated into the Greek as decalogo or decalogi, if I'm correct, in terms of the pronunciation, decalogue, as we would say in English, the 10 statements, the 10 words. And so indeed, God is speaking all the words in Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17. Fascinating enough, there's no 10 commandments. The first mistranslation was in the Bishop's Bible. The second one was in the Geneva Bible. And the third mistranslation of that phrase was finally in the King James. And it's still with us today. Now, I have no problem continuing to use the phrase, the 10 Commandments. But now we know more. And so we're taking a look at Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17 in a completely different light. So when we're going to be studying those verses, Exodus 20, verses 1 through 17, we're not just studying the 10 Commandments. Here we're taking a look at highlighted text in color. These are the 10 Commandments according to the Protestant tradition. And again, look how much is left out. The 10 Commandments are in, you say, a textual context, and when we're saying them, they're taken out of their textual context. So this is not just about 10 Commandments, but it's about Aseret HaDevareem, God's statements, his entire words in Exodus 20, verses 1 through 17. Here, you'll see the 10 Commandments, the Jewish version. They're underlined in red, and you can see God's words, his statements, all highlighted. And once again, we see how much is left out. And so we want to study the 10 Commandments in their textual context. So we're not just going to study the 10 Commandments. We want to study how those other words that God said deepen our understanding and enrich our understanding of the 10 Commandments, how it completes our understanding of what God's intentions were. What is he trying to get at? Now, in this series so far, we've covered 8 topics related to this introduction of the 10 Commandments. This is just an introduction. We haven't even got to studying each commandment in exact detail. Now, in number 9, in this section number 9 that we're dealing with, the introduction, we're asking this question: who are these 10 commandments for? Who was God speaking to? Are these just only for the Hebrews? Is this just only for Judaism and only for the religion of Judaism? And if that's the case, why does the church pay attention to them? We get to very interesting discussions that go to Ephesians 2, verses 8 through 10, and people say we're saved by grace and not by works, not by law. And a lot of people go off on that statement and say, see, we don't even have to do the Old Testament anymore. We don't have to do the old law. Well, the old law, the essence of the old law are the 10 Commandments. God said, this is my covenant. This is what he starts with. This is the basics. So if indeed the church is saying the Old Testament is out of date and it's no more, then the 10 Commandments are more. It doesn't make any sense. God said these statements are his covenant. It's a new covenant at the mountain of God, Sinai. And they were led by Moses, who was a shepherd. But the church pays attention to these 10 commandments. So is the church saying that this covenant has not been done away with? Is the church saying that the new covenant in Jesus has not replaced the old? By the way, just as a very interesting comment, we hear people in the church talking about the new covenant in Jesus replaces the old covenant. Nowhere in the Bible, anywhere, will you see the word replace or the word replaces or the word replaced anywhere in the Bible, not just the New Testament, anywhere. The Bible does not say that the Sinai covenant has been replaced. It's very interesting. Very, very interesting. So let's get into this concept number 9. Who really is to be receiving these 10 commandments? What is God really saying? Let's take a look. So again, I thank Dennis Prager as one of the scholars that I have actually accessed and learned so much from him. He addresses the question here that we're focusing in topic 9, and that is, who are the 10 commandments for? Who are they written to? It seems that God is telling us that not only is the covenant forever, but it's universal. Now, Dennis Prager does this in a geographical way. We're taking a look at the Middle East. We can see the Sinai Peninsula in the lower left-hand corner. Somewhere down there is Mount Sinai. And this is always considered no man's land, unpopulated. Even in Jesus's day, in Paul's day, it was part of a Roman province. We have the Roman documents from those days that specifically say that the Sinai Peninsula was part of the Roman province that was called Arabia, meaning the place of the nomads is one way of looking at it. Arabia, in its actual meaning, is a place one crosses over. Well, that's what nomads do. They cross over a specific area. They don't just live there. This is no man's land. Nobody's living here. So when we take a look at Dennis Prager's Exodus, the Rational Bible, he gives 3 reasons why God gave these 10 commandments in no man's land, because that's exactly what he did. First of all, it's a guide for all nations. He said, It's the best behavior for Jew and non-Jews alike, for the Jewish nation of Israel and other nations, the whole world, okay, to create a good society. So what Dennis Prager is suggesting in Exodus, the Rational Bible, he's basically saying, why did God give his 10 commandments, this covenant, in no man's land, in a place that was a non-country? First of all, because it was written for all nations. Now, this is interesting. The Bible does not say that, but it seems as if, because it's in this uninhabited territory, that it's not only for the Jews, but it's also for Gentiles, ourselves as well. And we have to remember, there were non-Jews, non-Hebrews, to be precise, at Sinai. You can read about that because there were a group of people that were non-Hebrews that went along with the Hebrews when they left Egypt. So this was given in a non-country, and it's universal. It's for all people. A second reason Dennis Prager would say that it was given in this non-country, it's binding on Israel and all of us everywhere. If it's binding in a non-country, the implication then by God is it's binding everywhere. The third, it wasn't given in Israel. It was not given in one tribal territory. That might elevate a certain tribal view of themselves. It was given in, let's say, in the area of the tribe of Benjamin, north of Jerusalem. Then the Benjamites might feel, hey, we're really special. God gave it in our territory. No, all the tribes, all of us are equal in God's sight. Now, another interesting aspect is Nahum Sarna. He is an amazing, proven, credible, trustworthy Jewish scholar who wrote the JPS Torah commentary on the book of Exodus and also the book of Genesis as well. Amazing, just amazing stuff. Now, Nahum Sarna, he talks about the fact that when we start reading Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17, God spoke. He spoke these words. To who? I find it fascinating that Nahum Sarna and Dennis Prager have shown me that we really need to pay attention to how words are used in the Bible. Here, it says God spoke. To who? Normally, when you look at this, and you have to check this out if you've got that good Bible software where you can check words and phrases and so on. And I've done this over and over and over again. When you see God spoke, it's either God spoke to Moses, or God spoke to Aaron, or God spoke to Abraham, or God spoke to the sons of Israel. This is one of the few times, one of the rare times where it just says God spoke. Nahum Sarna says this seems to imply that God is speaking to everyone, that indeed the 10 commandments are universal. They are meant for the whole world. But what surprised me is there's something even more powerful than Dennis Prager's opinion or Nahum Sarna's opinion. This is the very words of God. And again, this was taken from the website gotquestions.org. And you can see the link so that you could actually go and access the same article that I did. But there in gotquestions.org, it shows us at least 11 places where the 10 commandments are mentioned. From Paul, look at in statement 1, do not worship any other gods. In Paul's letter to the Corinthians, in Paul's letter to Timothy, or John, the Apostle John, do not make idols. 1 John chapter 5. And then a little bit further down, there in 1 Peter, number 6, do not murder. In 1 Peter 4:15. You can actually get this list again at gotquestions.org. Now, I brought up Jesus himself in number 11. Jesus mentions 6 of the 10 commandments in one event. Somebody came to him and asked Jesus, Lord, Rabbi, how is it that I could inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, well, you know the law. What does the law tell you? What does the Torah tell you? What does God's instruction tell you? And then Jesus says, do murder, do not steal, do not commit adultery, don't covet. And so he mentioned 6 of them. So with Jesus mentioning 6 of them, it seems clear we Christians, by Jesus's very words, we're tied to them. They're tied to us. So this is very interesting. Here's Jesus talking about 6 of the 10 commandments in response to that man's question. How do I inherit eternal life? But Paul and Peter and John, the 10 commandments are all over the Gospels and the letters, the epistles. So indeed, it seems as if Jesus, God himself, by his very own words, is tying us to the 10, tying us to the Sinai covenant. The key statement that we have is the 10 commandments. The Sinai covenant is related to all of us. It's part of our Christian heritage as well. So I'd like to get into the 10th section of the introduction with regards to the 10 commandments. And some people say the 10 commandments quite definitely are a part of the religion of Judaism. That's yes. Based upon what we just did in section 9, the 10 commandments are certainly part of the Christian religion as well, no doubt about it. So it seems to be more than just about a specific religion. Is there more that we aren't seeing? Let's take a look. So again, Dennis Prager has helped me again with this, pointing out some really cool distinctions about the 10 commandments. There's a discussion about 2 sets of the commandments, 2 sets because there's 2 tablets. And so the guess is, if you take a look on the left, were the commandments split so that on one tablet there were 4 commandments all related to God, and on the other tablet there were 6 commandments all related to other people. And you'll notice that we have honor your father and your mother there on the right side, listed with other things that are related to other people. Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not kill, okay, and honor your father and your mother. That's all related to other people. And that makes sense. That is a reasonable conclusion that you could make. However, if we take a look at the tablets on the right side, and if we take honor your father and your mother and you include it in the first 5, this also makes sense as well. Because honor your father and your mother is related to God because God is creator. He's the one that brought mankind into existence. He was the creator, just as a mother and father. Man and woman are made in the image of God, and they follow in God's image, you might say, by creating us. Our mothers and dads create us. And they are the ones to care for us and to bring us to God himself. So we have these 2 ways that we could take a look at the 10 commandments. And whether you do 4 by 6, like on the left 2 tablets, or whether you do 5 by 5 on the right set of tablets, it's pretty clear that what we're looking at is the left side seems to deal with our connection to God. The right side deals with our connection to society. How do we treat God? And how do we treat others in relationship to this covenant that we're involved in? As we look at it, is how do we treat God How do we treat others? How do we treat those in society? So the covenant with God is more than do's and don'ts. As Dennis Prager shared, I really believe in his comments. His comments are solid. This is a basis for a good life in an orderly society. I remember Dennis Prager in one of his audios. Just imagine if everyone really believed and adhered to God's instruction, do not murder or do not steal. Just imagine, do not commit adultery, do not covet. Having court systems that were fair and provided blind justice, if you would, whether for the rich or for the poor or the influential or those who did not have any influence whatsoever. Now, for the Jews, we understand that their religion was not just a component of their life. It was not just a part of their life. It was the umbrella for their life. It was life itself. Our actions and our words become our life. Look at this in Deuteronomy 30, 19 through 20. Moses is teaching the people what he has learned from Yahweh, the Lord. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. So choose life in order that you may live, you and your descendants, by loving the Lord your God, by obeying his voice, and by holding fast to him. For this is your life and the length of your days, that you may live in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them. Notice that it says obeying his voice, and God spoke the beginning of his covenant. The 10 statements, Aseret HaDevareem, in Exodus 20, verse 117, we are to obey that. This is our life. Let's consider another one. Deuteronomy 32, 46 through 47. Again, Moses is teaching the Hebrews what God has taught him, and he said to them, take to your heart all the words with which I'm warning you today, which you shall command your sons to observe carefully, even all the words of this law. Now, in the Hebrew, it's not the words of this law, but the words of this Torah. Torah is not law. Torah means instruction, God's instruction. So to teach your sons to observe carefully, even all the words of God's instruction. For it is not an idle word to you. Indeed, it is your life. And by this word, you will prolong your days in the land which you are to cross the Jordan to possess. So the Jewish view, religion itself is life, and life is religion. It is the umbrella over everyday life. The 10 Commandments are not platitudes. They're not how to be good or do good. This is about real life. The Nazis, they thought they were doing good. They thought they were doing good when they murdered Jewish people, millions of them, 6 million. And what about people who believe in abortion rights and who believe in the right to choose? They think they're doing good. 10 Commandments, you guys. It's not nothing to do about doing good or being faithful. These are very precise orders. And they're negative statements as well. Don't do this, don't do that. Do not withhold honor from your father and your mother. It's another way of looking at it. Or in other words, to keep the Sabbath holy. You might say the law actually is, or the specific command right there is, do not continue your work, your normal work that you normally do 6 days a week on the Sabbath. You have to stop. So these are precise negative statements about our behavior. Do not murder, do not steal. It's how you live it out. In other words, don't tell me, show me. And Jesus, Yeshua, the Jewish rabbi, he knows this. Matter of fact, he taught it. In Matthew 7, verses 21 to 23, we read, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter." Look at this. Not everyone who says, but he who does. Not everyone who says, but he who does. It's not by works. Definitely, we're saved by grace, not by works. But Jesus is saying, don't tell me you've got faith. Show me. We go on and it says, "Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name cast out demons, and in your name perform many miracles?' And then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness.'" Now, when we talk about the fact of Jesus, what language was he speaking? He's speaking Hebrew, and the word "knew" is the Hebrew word yada. Strong's number H3045. It's experiential knowing. Experiential. In other words, knowing by experience, knowing by life events. Jesus seems to be implying, said, "I never had an experience with you. I never had an action of yours in real life that shows me your faith." So Jesus seems to be saying, again, don't tell me about your faith. Show me. Are you a Christian? Are you a disciple of Jesus? Don't tell me. Words are cheap. How can I tell that what you say is true? It's going to be by your actions. You're not saved by them. But the thing is that a genuine faith, a genuine discipleship in Jesus, it's going to be clear by the way you live in all aspects of your life. Now, one thing that we hear is the church, or one thing we hear in the church is we need to live a balanced life. I have heard this, oh man, since my high school days. That religion is only a component of life. You check the box, because I went to church on Sunday. Okay, I'm done with my religion for the week. Okay, I took my kid to a soccer game on Thursday night. Check the box. I'm done with my relationships. I'm done with my family for the week. Okay, I worked 9 hours today. I'm only supposed to work 8. Check the box. Not only did I work, but I worked overtime. So indeed, I can eliminate work off of my schedule at this time. I could check the box. I did exercises today. I'm supposed to do it 3 times a week. Check the box. Now, one of the things that I learned prior to me entering a Catholic university, we had to read some books by St. Augustine. And I believe one of the books was called The City of God. And in there, one of the things that I learned is Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, seemed to have a tremendous influence on the Church of Rome, not the messianic beginnings of our faith in Israel in Jesus's day and Paul's day, but this is the Roman church now that had cut itself completely off from Israel. Aristotle talked about a balanced life. And he talked about the fact that there should be no component of one's life that becomes dominant over another component so as to distort the balance. Aristotle said to have a good life, a happy life, you have to have a balanced life. If you're interested in that article, you can see the link to that article from Dr. Robert Muller, and it is a very intriguing article. So, religion is just a component of our life? Really? So it can be done away with? Well, what about a happy atheist, according to Aristotle? An atheist who has no religion a part of his life, certainly he can just eliminate it completely. In other words, a religion can be separated. We don't need it. Or a skeptic, a happy skeptic and a happy atheist and a happy Christian, all having various components of their lives, some with religion and some without religion. But with the 10 Commandments and with our connection to God and our connection to society under one covenant, we find that our religion affects every aspect of our lives. There's no distinction between the religious and the secular. So religion becomes an umbrella over all of it. We are to be disciples of Jesus Christ when we go to our kids' soccer game and all aspects of our family. We are to be disciples of Jesus Christ in our work life. We are to be disciples of Jesus Christ even when we go to the gym and exercise. So indeed, we say, Aristotle, sorry, man, stick with your Greek gods. Besides that, they were only figments of your imagination. Sorry, Aristotle, we're consumed. We're consumed by our relationship with our bridegroom and our bridegroom in his relationship with us. We're consumed like we read in Jeremiah 20, verse 9. If I say I will not mention him, nor speak any more in his name, his word becomes a blazing fire in my heart, deep within inside my soul, deep inside my bones. I am weary of keeping it in. Indeed, I will not.